Composite Gloves here, and this is another video in the FL12's effects series. And today we're going to cover the flanger. And so what we're going to do to understand the flanger is we're going to open up a citrus, and we're going to set it to default. And we're going to right click the first operator and make it a saw wave. And we're going to turn down the volume. Yeah, we'll leave it as a saw. So that's the sign we should get, and we want to see what our sound is doing. So we're going to add a wave candy, which will serve us quite nicely, and we'll make it so we can see it. That is what we have. We're going to make it more clear. And we're going to be hearing a lot of that right now because we are going to be flanging our stuff. Flanger. So flanger, what it does is it takes your signal and feeds it back into itself, and as a result you get all sorts of interesting phase cancellation, and this is sort of just a really in-depth way of controlling that cancellation. And they have some ways of modulating it and just doing all these things, but if we play our sound now, you see it's completely changed. It's something totally different. You know what, I'm going to turn down the volume even more because I'm telling you right now it's going to get old fast. So but we have our delay sound. We'll just turn the gain up more on this guy. And let's talk about what these things do. So first off, you have this damp control. And when you turn that on, it's basically like filtering the feedback. So it'll essentially act as a dry wet for you. There's our original signal. And you can go between. Now it acts as a filter to the feedback loop though. So it's not quite the same. You could round out the curves of your signal with this. This delay, it says how long before it reintroduces the signal into your signal. So whenever we hit a note, it's going to take this amount of milliseconds to reintroduce that signal back into our signal right here. And let's turn depth down for now. So you see we have a square wave right now. And we'll turn our rate down. And we'll turn our phase down. We really want to set this to be turn invert feedback off. And actually leave these ones alone. Okay, there we have our saw wave. Sort of. And we're going to be using this frequency because it's just really clear what it's doing. And so that's it with no delay. And then as we turn the delay on, you will see the signal be introduced, and you will see it also where it lines up with the waveform. And you see it's creating phase cancellation. So while one's hitting positive amplitude, the other's hitting negative, and as a result, it finds the in-between, the difference between the two, and that is the signal that goes out. And by modulating this delay, as you can see, modulating it up and down using our rate, they have a LFO in here that can do that. And so when we modulate our rate, it will scroll through that for us as we move our rate up. Oh, and you also need depth. I guess we should cover depth real fast. So what depth does is essentially the same thing. And then as we turn them both on, it'll modulate between the two, but so it'll modulate delay first, and then it will do delay plus depth, and then do delay again, and it will go back and forth between these at a rate according to, you know, what rate we set here. You can go up to 5 hertz, so 5 times a second, and you can also set the shape that controls that. So a sine wave, you know, will do it slower, while a triangle wave will be a bit more directional, more on off, a little more sharp movement. And you can see it working. And that's the triangle. If we turn it up faster, I think it'll be easier to see. This is the sign. So that is what those controls do. And you might be saying, why would I want that? Well, I don't know. As you're going along in sound, you may want something like this. You have phase, which is essentially your stereo image. So right now it's mono at 0. 100 or 180 is completely out of phase. So one's coming out your left, one's coming out your right. And then 360. That's just how wide your stereo field is. Now, if we turn our delay up big time, we take a long time that it gets much slower. If we turn the delay up, we get this pulsing effect because first it's by itself, then it adds the two values together, then it goes by itself, and you get all these different variations. It's really interesting. Like, this is something you just mess with all day. Anyways, we already talked about damp. We're going to turn it up so we can hear it. And you can see that working. We've talked about that. This feedback is the amount of feedback, this could be important, that actually goes back in your signal. And when you start messing with the amount, because right now only like 22% of our signal is going back in that's being modulated. But if you put a bunch of it in, it starts to sound way funky, man. Because this all of a sudden becomes much more dramatic when this is introduced into our signal. Because remember, the phases aren't completely lined up. If the phases did completely line up, you wouldn't have a signal. And then you have this invert phase option. So we have our feedback coming in, and let's say the phase is like this. If we want to invert the phase, we go like this instead. It start down instead of up. So instead of going up, down, invert phase, we go down, up. And that's pretty much all it does. It flips it, and that may or may not produce the quality you want. This also could be useful if you're recording something and you're flanging it and you are having a problem with phase, which can become a problem when you're working with mics. Less common in EDM and stuff like that, but if you're making pretty much anything that has to do with microphones, phase becomes a big deal. Then you have invert wet, so you could take your wet signal and invert that, so the affected signal. And that gives you a really weird, well, just different results. Yes, feedback, man. Then you have dry, just the amount of dry signal that comes in, and it goes from negative infinity decibels to 0. You have how much of the wet signal comes out, or this is how much is going out. And then you have your cross, and cross inverts your wet signal stereo image. So if I'll just show you. So there's our signal. And this is your stereo field. You just hear it switch. So what was in the left speaker is now in the right, and what was in the right speaker is now in the left. Which could be important. So that's really quick. Make a sound using the flanger, because flangers are cool. Now, along with this, because it's cloning your signal, something with a lot more spectral content will be far more interesting. So a saw wave has a lot of overtones versus something like a sine wave only has one tone. So it's not near as exciting, but it could be useful for observing behaviors. Because you can see the amplitude going up and down real clearly now, so we know what's going on. And we could turn the dampening on or off. Oh, what the heck? That's weird. I don't know what that's about. And we, yeah, just really nifty for observing behaviors. Those sounds always remind me of Sonic the Hedgehog. And you could definitely hear the the wet being crossed over between your speakers. So, anyways, that's really cool. So, Yeah, something with more overtone content will be a bit more. And now this sounds more like a chorus at this point, which a chorus, essentially, it just detunes the different... well, we'll talk about chorus when we get to chorus. I've explained chorus in like almost every series I've done thus far. But let's just make a chord and show you what happens. This is usually a standing effect that people just put on it to create more lush sound. Or maybe they're going after this weird feedback thing. And you get really 8-bit sound from this. This is an old effect. This effect's been around for like forever. Because it's pretty easy to put a signal back into itself using a tape machine and then just have it phase inverted. Or, you know, just do whatever you want through your analog gear. And that's what that does. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Like, comment, and subscribe. And have a blessed day.